And welcome to the Housing Opportunity Commission of Montgomery County's Development and Finance Committee meeting for December 20th, 2024. My name is Jeff Merkowitz. To my right is Commissioner Roy Priest, who is also the chair of the commission. And to my left is Commissioner Robin Solomon, who is the Commissioner Pro Tem of the commission. The first order of business on today's agenda is the approval of the minutes from our committee meeting of November 22nd, 2024. Can I get a motion to approve those minutes?
Second.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Minutes have been approved. Thank you. The only item on our full agenda today is the approval of a development plan and selection of a general contractor for our Sage property at Westside Shady Grove. I will turn this over to President Chelsea Andrews.
Thank you. Thank you, commissioners, members of the public, and the HOC team. We continue to advance our development of the Sage at Westside Shady Grove. For members of the public, this is a development that is directly across from the Laureate and one that we are extraordinarily excited about. Today, you will hear a presentation that provides our recommendation related to the development plan for this parcel, as well as the selection of the general contractor so that we can take next steps. Just so that we also keep you on track with what to expect next, there will be another presentation in the future related to the financing plan, which would be advanced by our mortgage finance team in conjunction with our real estate team. And so with that, I'd like to turn it over to our development team led by Nihar Shah, our Vice President of Real Estate, and Alex Lauren, who is the Housing Acquisition Manager leading this project.
Thank you, President Andrews. Good afternoon, commissioners. For the record, my name is Alex Lauren. I'm a Housing Acquisition Manager here at HOC. I'm here today seeking support from the Development and Finance Committee, the recommendation of a final development plan for the Sage, and to approve the select general contractor and authorization for President, Executive Director Andrews to negotiate a guaranteed maximum price contract with the selected GC. These recommendations are in keeping with the milestone of closing on the financing transaction to start construction in April of 2025. The timeline towards closing with interim actions to be taken with the commission, including GMP execution and a financing plan, will be discussed later in the presentation. The Sage is the final multifamily phase in the master plan Westside Shady Grove, and will represent our third partnership with UIA in providing a mixed income community in a transit-oriented location. We're proud and excited to bring to you the final development plan of the Sage. You can go to the next slide, please. Page 4. Thank you. So the project site for the Sage is currently owned by Montgomery County, with UIA owning a right to purchase the site under a master purchase agreement. Upon execution of the pre-development agreement between HOC and UIA in February of this year, all rights under the master purchase agreement for the Sage were agreed to be assigned to the ownership entity of HOC upon settlement for the purpose of development and ownership of the Sage. Because of HOC's sole ownership of the development and the planned affordability program, the acquisition price agreed to with the county has been roughly $12,000 per market rate unit, considerably less than recent land sale comps in the area. Staff is planning to utilize a combination of senior debt proceeds from the issuance of FHA risk share insured tax exempt government bonds, HPF, a green energy loan from Montgomery County Green Bank, and HOC equity sourced from OHRF. For the purpose of securing the government tax exempt bonds, HOC will be the sole owner of the property. Therefore, no state ceiling private activity volume cap would be required. Staff initially presented and the commission approved a pre-development plan with UIA as private partner. However, the current proposed financing plan requires HOC's full governmental ownership. The relationship with UIA is a highly valued one, and UIA will retain its role performing development and construction management services through construction duration. The development agreement with UIA is currently being negotiated, and staff will return to the commission in March to present the proposed terms for that agreement. Next slide, please. The development plan for the stage will help HOC meet its strategic plan goals and objectives through the expansion of HOC's portfolio of high quality affordable housing through the inclusion of 123 units at or below 65% of the AMI, and through the expansion of housing supply in Montgomery County with the addition of 413 total units in partnership with a private partner. Of the 413 residential units, 20% of the units will be at or below 50% AMI, with an additional 10% at or below 65% AMI. The project will include ample amenities, include a lobby lounge, state-of-the-art fitness area with private yoga studio, kids playroom area and outdoor play area, club and game room, kitchen, dining spaces, and multiple flex meeting spaces for work from home capabilities. Outdoor amenities include 3 courtyards containing a pool, fire pit, lounge areas, grill stations, and quieter garden areas for more contemplative use. There's approximately 7,000 square feet of commercial space that is currently planned as a public library. The plan is to deliver that space as a cold dark shell, with the county incurring the cost for the build out of that space. This partnership with the county would provide a unique amenity to the community at a lower cost to ownership than traditional retail. To enhance sustainable performance, the building will incorporate renewable energy sources and roof mounted solar panels, all electric appliances, and EV charging stations. The unit mix was informed by a market study and includes 6% studios, 54% 1 bedrooms, 36% 2 bedrooms, and 4% 3 bedrooms. Next slide, please. Here you'll find the operating pro forma. We're recommending Bozzuto Management manage the building as they are for the Laureate. We're excited to further develop our longstanding relationship with them and leverage economies of scale, lowering management fee and expenses on a per unit basis due to the economics of scale, this being a larger project than the Laureate, and shared staffing. Next slide, please. As President Andrews mentioned, a final financing plan will be presented to the commission in March. We've identified what is currently the plan for sources and uses of the transaction. The senior mortgage will be government issued tax exempt bonds, with the remaining capital stack filled with OHRF, HPF, and a green bank loan, the latter of which we believe will be a great opportunity to leverage our sustainable efforts and further our partnership with the Green Bank. At this time, before moving into the GC selection, I'll pause for any comments or questions on the development plan.
Are there any questions?
We already have a commitment from the county related to the library.
We are currently negotiating a lease with them at this moment.
I had a few questions, and I can either put them in writing later and we can deal with it at the appropriate time, or I can ask them now. Let me know how you want to proceed, Chelsea. A couple of them are just for my education. And also there was a typo that it said $300 a unit for the reserve for replacement, and then it said 350.
It's 300.
I'm just curious about the taxes and insurance. There won't be taxes and insurance. There are other fees, I assume?
Taxes will be constrained to the retail portion.
Oh, I see.
You're correct in that they will not be assessed on the residential.
I'm curious on the sources and uses, and again, interrupt me if you'd rather have this in writing for the purposes of the committee at a later date. Is EYA guaranteeing construction or are they just supervising?
So this is a part of the development agreement. I think the prior agreement, when they were participating in the equity, there were different terms for that. I think with the HOC's sole governmental ownership now, we are currently negotiating those terms.
And that's why I was asking, because obviously I saw that it was changing. So the reason I'm asking is if we're the ultimate backstop for construction, it's worthy then of discussion about the development fee split, which I'm not going to make suggestions about. But if they're just doing construction administration, that's one thing, and everything else associated with it, coordination and whatnot. If we're ultimately on the hook for overruns and whatever, maybe it's a different kind of discussion, and we should be having it as we did with another deal on the developer fee. And I know you're starting from scratch, but I wanted to raise that subject area.
And we can definitely, anything that gets into details with terms, are discussions that we would have in closed session. And we are in the process of negotiating what this could look like. As you can see, our funding sources ultimately, in terms of making sure we're able to garner the best terms, result in HOC being the sole owner of this parcel. That wasn't what we initially conceptualized. And so we're in the process of determining what and how we could negotiate terms with EYA in regards to what their participation could look like, which ultimately would trigger or determine what guarantees should look like as well. In this instance, it could be one extreme or another. They're just doing the development and they get a development fee in their fee for, a fee developer, or some other scenario that's creative that we will explore and present.
And I understand your answer, but I wanted to raise it just so it was.
Yes, and
Something
to your first question, it's always a great idea to send questions in advance. If you do, we're prepared to respond on the spot. If not, if they come in the midst of the conversation, we'll take great
enough.
notes and follow up. And if it's something that we could answer on the spot, we obviously will. If it's something that's confidential in terms of terms that are being negotiated, then I'll also just share, just as I did.
Fair enough. And I accept that comment, and I'll try and do that in the future. One thing I was curious about was we've got $3 million of pre-development costs in, maybe increasing to 6 or some number. I'm curious what EYA's number is, if there's a reference to it, but not a number.
So the 6.8 pre-development budget, which was agreed to under the pre-development agreement that was brought to commission and approved in February, that was to be solely sourced by HOC to bring the projects to this point to permitting. So we've spent, as you've noted, a little over 3 million of that. The remaining of those fees are primarily permitting fees.
Okay. And I'm curious what EYA's, to the extent that's a publicly appropriate number, there's a reference to it, and just a lump, there's a footnote, that's all.
Sure.
Again, it's again in the context of what the whole relationship will ultimately be and who's putting in what and how much and so on and so forth.
Right. And what we'll do, we'll get that information. I know that, of course, as you all recall, EYA assembled this parcel almost over 10 years ago. And so there definitely have been expenditures that EYA has had for various parcels. We will have that information to be able to provide in terms of how much they've spent to date on this particular, in terms of pre-development on this particular site.
And again, the context of my question is who's getting what ultimately and who's putting
Right.
in. So you understand. There's a line item for reserves and guarantees. I recognize what the words say, that there's $1 million for the reserve for debt service just during construction. It'd be useful to understand, because I'm sure you've got a projection for what the deal will look like permanently, subject to change, of course. I don't know what a guarantee line item means, or maybe it's just a nomenclature thing. I think of guarantee as a piece of paper that's very important, but not a dollar line item. It says guarantees and reserves. I didn't know.
I'm not certain I'm understanding your question.
I don't know
You
what
mean in regards to the set aside that's put for construction operating reserves?
So it says on page 7, guarantees and reserves.
Yes, and then the
it says $1
footnote.
million. I didn't know why. I didn't know what guarantees meant, or maybe it's just a leftover from another slide.
So I think the nomenclature there is just a categorical name, but that's so I think it's just been left over from
Okay.
a broader category that includes the $1
Fair
million.
enough. It just confused me.
Sure. Sorry.
Guarantees are important, but I usually don't see line items for them. I think it would be helpful for us to know what you're anticipating, whether it's in public or private session, what your reserves are for the future after construction, or for our operating reserve, and the usual stuff, just so we know kind of where you're heading, what debt coverage you're thinking, because we're doing it piecemeal, but it's nice to know what the end point is you're anticipating, and we're all grown-ups that we know things change. So it's not like if a number changes, we're going to come after you. But to me, it's logical to see the whole picture as you anticipate it now, which we can do in another session or in private or whatever. But this doing it, like you've got permanent sources here, I think, but you don't have necessarily permanent uses, or maybe I'm wrong.
These are the construction sources.
Just the construction sources. Okay. So it'd be helpful. That's right. I don't see tax exempt bonds. So you're right. It'd be useful to know kind of where we're heading. I do models, right? And then there's the construction piece, the final piece. You're interested in the final piece because you want to know the deal works versus building something and you know it's not going to work, which of course is not what you're doing. So I think it'd be useful for us to understand ultimately where the deal's going. As you conceive it today, knowing that things change, you put a buffer in for interest rates, but you know, stuff changes. And I can write these all down for you if you want, if that's helpful to you.
Yes, that we're taking notes too, but if there are other questions and, I know we're going to have an administrative session where we'll have an opportunity to hear all of those initial inquiries that you would like to make sure are reflected in our materials in one way so that we can ensure that it's presented in each of the packets. We'll definitely do that moving forward. So we're taking copious notes. We're going to go back to prior development finance committee meetings too, to kind of see what were some of the questions that came out there. And then ultimately we'll agree on what should be included in what packet based on the information you all would like.
I don't need all 78 line items.
Yes.
In fact, I'd prefer not to. But I'm trying to anticipate, as we did with a prior deal, so that we have that discussion maybe earlier in the process, which would be helpful probably for both sides, but that we're on different sides. Thank you.
Sure. So I've got a few questions as well. I'm going to just start with being a little picky on it says we, our standard is 30% of units that would be affordable. And we have 123 units. Again, just being picky, 30% of 413 is 123.9. And I'm wondering, can we make that 124?
No, the 0.9 unit has a discounted rent.
So, okay. Just, I guess, a comment on the, or a question on, with some of the financing. Montgomery County Green Bank, I know, is a subrecipient of Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund money. I don't know if we're getting some advantageous financing or any of that tapping into those resources at all, or if there's anything additional that we can tap into there on that.
So they have approached us with those additional funds, and I know those would be offered at a lower rate than what has currently been offered. So it's definitely something that we are discussing with them and will continue to do so in the beginning of next year.
Great. Question for my benefit, maybe others understand this already, but we say that, and maybe this is tied in with the change in the structure with the UIA, but say that for the purposes of securing the proceeds, government tax exempt bonds, HOC will be the sole owner of the property. Therefore, no state ceiling private activity volume cap is required. And I'm just curious how, again, this is, maybe others already understand this, how ownership affects the volume cap.
When there's a private ownership in the transaction, if we're to use tax exempt financing, there is a requirement for volume cap to be allocated to the transaction. If HOC is the sole owner and we're issuing tax exempt bonds, we're able to issue tax exempt governmental bonds, and therefore we do not require an allocation of volume cap. Because we only receive an annual allocation of $46 million, clearly not enough to finance this transaction that's requiring about $130-some million. And so we're able to issue governmental bonds to fund the entire amount and at the same time issue tax exempt bonds.
Okay.
And so our volume cap or annual volume cap allocation may be used elsewhere in the tax credit transaction. This isn't a tax credit transaction, so we're able to do that.
Okay, great. Is that what prompted the shift with EYA?
That's one of the motivations to fund it efficiently.
Mhm.
Otherwise, it would be very challenging. And so, Yeah.
Okay, right.
So what happens in essence is the subsidies from the county fill in for the tax credit equity that would otherwise come with the bonds.
Right. Also, just as sort of looking at the operating pro forma, and this is more of an aside and perhaps a longer discussion elsewhere, but on the insurance costs, I've just been reading a lot lately about sort of skyrocketing insurance costs for housing and affordable housing in particular. I don't know if we're being affected as much in this region by that, but I'm just kind of curious if insurance costs is becoming an issue for us at all.
Good afternoon. So yeah, it is impacting this area, but our risk manager, John Boyer, has done a pretty good job of shopping our insurance rates and keeping it low. And to the extent that we utilize the Montgomery County self-insurance program, we're a little shielded from the increases.
Okay, so we have a self-insurance program. Yeah.
For the property insurance, not liability insurance for most of our properties, not all.
Okay. Yeah. Because I've seen that a number of affordable housing agencies or nonprofits are trying to engage in some group self-insurance. Okay. Something obviously to keep an eye on, I guess. And then I think finally, before we move on to the general contractor, but related, in the transaction sources and uses, note that this does not include a contractor's contingency, but later on, it suggests that there will be a contractor that this plan is to include it in the final construction financing budget. And I'm just curious why it's not being incorporated at this point or here.
So the construction contract that's been proposed by CBG does not include a contractor's contingency. HOC is including a 4% owner's contingency, which is included in the line item of additional construction related costs. In
Okay.
this. I can break that out if that would be more helpful.
Okay.
Is 4 typical? Seems light to me, but is that typical for what you do?
It ranges between 4 and 5%.
Yeah, usually I would think 5, but
So but the point is that building that into the contract is not going to affect this pro forma or
So we expect
these sources.
so this is going to be outside of the GMP. This is kind of the contingency, hard cost contingency. We also have a separate line item for soft cost contingency. But then within the GMP, we fully expect, and Alex can talk a little bit more about that, some buyout savings that can be used as additional contingency within the GMP contract.
Okay.
So that would be used first before we actually start depleting the owner contingency.
Roy, did you have a question?
Yeah. Will this transaction exhaust our current use of our housing production funds?
We have, no, in fact, we're going to be issuing $50 million for the HPF. This transaction and timing has 29 million. And then we are, of course, going to receive the funds back from the laureate here shortly, as well as we go to permanent financing there. So considering the revolving nature of the account, we do have a path forward with regards to the additional development projects that we have underway.
Yeah, I asked that question only because I know when we originally laid out the housing production fund, we identified early uses of those dollars.
Yes.
That was part of the sales pitch to get this done. So I just wondered where this was in terms of that use of that initial allocation that we had.
This is identified.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, if you want to continue with the.
Sure. Thank you for your questions and comments.
Thank you.
So moving to page 8, please. So in October of 2024, HOC issued RFP number 2478 for general contracting services for the construction of the Sage. 4 responses were received in November of 2024, and a scoring team comprised of HOC team members and EYA staff reviewed and scored those proposals based on the 6 criteria presented here and their allocation of points. These are pretty consistent with what's been done in the past. Move on to page 9, please. We received very sophisticated proposals from 4 very reputable GCs in the market. The 4 respondents included CBG, Copley Williams, Moriarty, and Paradigm, a couple of which, CBG and Paradigm, are currently working on HOC projects. Next slide, please. So following a review of the proposals, the scoring team scored CBG the highest. CBG has made their name constructing mid-rise type 3A wood frame construction. They proposed a very experienced team and included a competitive price. Additionally, they proposed 30% MFD participation, and the references our team contacted spoke very highly of them. Next slide, please. So the total GMP amount proposed by CBG is approximately 115 million. Staff is proposing a GMP contract be negotiated based on this number, plus a 5% contingency for any movement between now and then, with the final terms presented to the commission in March. Next slide, please. So the construction schedule that's been proposed anticipates an April start after receiving permit approvals in early 2025, and closing on construction financing in March, April of 2025. Happy to discuss the construction sequencing. The committee is interested. Next slide, please. It's also worth noting they're considering a 27-month construction duration. So March and April aren't that far away. So the transaction schedule here identifies the next steps and commission actions needed to effectuate the transaction. Assuming your support here today and approval by the commission in January of the final development plan and GC selection, staff will proceed towards GMP negotiations and the presentation of a GMP contract and development agreement in March. Mortgage finance team will simultaneously work towards presenting a final financing plan in March. This would allow for GMP execution, closing of construction financing and land transference, and the issuance of a notice to proceed to the GC, all to occur in April of 2025. Next slide, please. So in summary, we'd like to ask the Development and Finance Committee support staff's recommendation to the Commission to approve the final development plan of the Sage, approve CBG as the general contractor for the construction of the Sage, and authorize the President, Executive Director to negotiate a GMP contract with CBG. At this time, I'll take any additional questions.
Any questions?
I don't have any questions, but the outline that you had in this presentation related to the guaranteed maximum price contract and all the itemized cost sectors that go into that. You know, you look at that, you really understand why these deals are so hard to do sometimes, because they all represent a potential cost area that can go up and down based upon materials, supplies, so many things. It's just, I think, for someone who's just looking at this, it's just an interesting chart to look at and acknowledge that.
Just curious, with the GMP, will there be any opportunity for shared savings or any other incentives for cost saving there?
Yes, so we have included as the base GMP contract that was included in the bid package. There was the opportunity to at least negotiate some shared savings as part of that package.
So we wanted to incentivize the contractor to buy out as quickly as possible, knowing where the market is currently and possible changes to the supplies or potential tariffs. we were trying to incentivize them to buy quicker than later. And so there's a kind of a split on the cost savings, where if they can procure in an expeditious manner, then they would get a little bit more than if they were to take more than 4 months, let's say.
Let's see. If there are no other questions, is there a motion to accept the staff's recommendation and to send this to the full commission? And moved and seconded. All seconded. Oh, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
The motion is approved. Are there any other items to come before this committee at this time?
It's time.
If not, then I will call this meeting adjourned, and I will guess is this our last meeting before the holidays? So to our copious viewing public, as well as all the staff here, I will wish everyone a happy new year and a happy holidays and a happy new year, and safe, and yes, stay safe. So thank you.
Thank you.
I second that motion.
Yes.
The meeting has now ended.